Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
There we go. Fixed. All right, everybody. Hopefully you can come back. Sorry about that. Had a few technical issues there. But it's fixed now, hopefully. It's really warm in my apartment today, so forgive me for being a little sweaty. So like I was saying, I was supposed to be in Colorado because I was kind of doing this whole like Revolution on the Road thing. And my friend Todd Showdown is designed a tattoo, a portrait of my mother. You can follow Todd Showdown on Instagram. His stuff is really amazing. And so I was supposed to fly out yesterday and get that done. But his kids got sick, and so we decided to kind of just reschedule. So, but it was really cool of him because he just was like, hey, do you want to get a portrait of your mom? I drew it up. And I was like, sure, yeah. And he's great, so it'll be interesting to do. We'll do a little special video on it when we do it. Also getting ready for the premiere of The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which is the film about my mother and, well, really my family, my parents. That hits theaters September 17th. A lot of mixed emotions. It's a good movie. I've seen it. It's good. It's not perfect, but it's also like 30 some odd years of their lives crushed into 2 hours. So they had to take some little liberties to kind of dramatize things so you could kind of get a feel for everything that did happen. But for you guys, hey, one of the things I would recommend is if you're going to go see The Eyes of Tammy Faye, I think we'll probably do some discussions about the film, actually, because I think people are curious. Is that The Eyes of Tammy Faye was originally a documentary done by World of Wonder, which is a really amazing group of filmmakers. And so there is a documentary called The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which probably confuses some people. But yeah, it's out there. I don't know where you can watch it. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But I really, really recommend watching The Eyes of Tammy Faye documentary, either before or after the film, so you kind of get a better idea of what's going on there. Because I think that the documentary was one of the best things ever done about my family and about that time of our history. So highly recommend you checking that out. And of course, the film will come out September 17th, so you've kind of got some time for that. Is it next week or the following week? The 13th, I'll be flying out to New York to see the premiere. And I'm really excited. My good friend Steve's going to be there as well. And so we'll be watching that with all the actors and movie people and stuff like that. So, it's been weird because I kind of had to draw boundaries around what I do and what I don't do, because it kind of brings back these old things of like being a kid on the couch, growing up on the television, and so you kind of have to make sure you have really weird boundaries. Life is so weird, man. Life is really weird for me right now, especially. But yeah, so that's happening. What else is going on? The world's still an insane place, and we still live in it. One of the things I was thinking about with today's talk was the idea of hope, and what hope really means and what hope really is. Now, in true Jay fashion, I kind of rewrote the thing and probably going to do another talk like really on the ideas of hope. Because I've been in a different place this week, I've been in a really strange place, and I guess that's going to be one of the things. Like I would even say, like, hey, if you want to skip a couple talks, go ahead and do it. just because right now, I'm going through a lot. So like I've done really well with my depression. I'm seeing an analyst, and I did a lot of really hard work in DBT, and saw therapy before that. But this stuff has definitely brought up some things, and a lot of things that a lot of people don't know about. Found things that weren't in the media, just personal things as growing up as a child, and but also growing up as a child where where everybody's eyes are on your family, and that was kind of the reality of my life for about the first 15 or 20 years of my life was these being in the public spotlight. And so that really was a challenge to grow up that way. Most people don't know about the troubles that are going on at your house, especially like really in a bizarre way, like, oh, I saw on People magazine that your parents aren't doing well, or I saw on the Rag magazine that your mom made an alien. There was one article that said I was going to kill Jerry Falwell. That was fun to be at school with that one on. There was another one that said I was disabled because they were talking about my dyslexia, but they didn't put that on the cover of the Rag magazine. So that was strange. But yeah, so there's it brings up a lot of stuff. So please enjoy my trauma for your entertainment. I'm just being sarcastic. Cheers. So my mom in 1978 wrote this book called I Gotta Be Me. I have a copy of it right here. This is a really old one. And very 70s. I think it was written in like 78. And the interesting is I feel like it was her way of being like her coming to a realization that she had to be her, at the time she wrote this book. And this is almost like my mom being like, I am Tammy Faye and this is who I am. And to be honest with you, I never really read the book, and I was talking to my therapist about it, and he was saying, well, haven't you read the book? And I said, well, strangely enough, I was talking to my sister the other day, and we were talking about this book, and she was like, you need to read that book. So I pulled it off the shelf. It's not too big. And since I guess I'm reading Hegel, this will probably be easier to read than Hegel, hopefully. Unless my mom's like really, really a hard philosopher, theologian to read. So I'm probably going to check that out. But so I was thinking about that today, is like, I've got to be me. And like the fight in my own life, in our own lives, to pretend that everything is okay. To pretend like we have it together when we go into work, when we in our relationships, to not share our ugliness with others. Maybe fear of driving them away, or fear of judgment, or just we've been taught that it's not professional to do that type of thing. But sometimes we even do that with our own relationships, with our intimate relationships. Sometimes we do that with our friendships, even as like, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to be too much, I don't want to always be that guy, So I'll just kind of, and so what happens is we often end up taking a lot of our awkwardness, or a lot of insecurities, or a lot of our anger and hurt, and kind of just pushing it down. Now, unfortunately, this stuff always comes out one way or the other. You might, you wonder like why your aunt is so passive aggressive. Why is she so passive aggressive? Why is she so mean? Probably because she's got a lot of shit she just never dealt with. So those little jabs towards you aren't really towards you. They're towards something that happened a long time ago that she never got to deal with, or he never got to deal with, whatever, And so I'm thinking about this as I'm going through this stuff of like, okay, now I've got to like not allow comments on my Facebook page. You know what I mean? Like, I put up a poster of my mom, the movie that's coming out. And I was like, oh, this is happening. Hey, if you're mean, please don't, do that here, do it somewhere else. And of course, people had the need to tell me that my mother's a grifter, and that my dad is a grifter, and that, she's a clown, at the blah, 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 all the same old shit that I heard growing up as a kid. Now, I'm not quite sure why people in social media worlds feel the need to do this, especially to family members of people. I know that they probably also have undealt with trauma as well, and that they're projecting things, and it's scapegoating, and it makes them feel better about themselves. Like, I know a lot of the technical reasons why. I've read Freud, I've been to enough therapy in my life to kind of understand that. But still, when you're on the other end of it, like even those reasons, you're just kind of like, ugh, like this is just a pain in the ass. And so, in dedication and to the ideals of Tammy Faye, my mama, I've got to be me, and I'm going to be me, and I'm always going to be me here. That's why I don't even like being called a pastor anymore, because pastors, I should just preach a good sermon on Sunday. Revolution is a community of people with faith and doubt, and we're all literally trying to make it through this world one day at a time. It's also kind of one of the reasons why I like John Lydon. Some of you might know him as John Rotten, the Sex Pistols. Boom. Or PIL, which I think is, I have my PIL bag right there. Boom. That's my record bag. Is because seeing people who really, sometimes they get people upset, but that they just don't care. Now, that's hard because we always like soft and cozy and fuzzy, but people who are able to speak their truth and just not give a damn. That's what I always kind of liked about punk rock, That's what I like about early punk rock, is that it spoke a truth that was true to them, and it just didn't care if you agreed or not, and sometimes it would even push back a little bit. And it was just trying to be something true to itself, even if it didn't know what itself was. It was just saying, like, I'm trying to find me, and this is who I am, and here I am. And I feel like we need a lot more of that in this world. Unfortunately, I feel like too often we punish people for that. We tell people, be yourself, and then we don't like what they are. Tell the truth. Oh, but not that way. I need a trigger warning. That's the problem, is we become very sensitive to truth tellers, so we kind of censor people who are the truth. And the funny thing is like we're censoring like deep thinkers and things like that, because we're going like, oh, you got to be careful. You need to be sensitive about what you talk about. Now, I'm not saying like this in a Mark Driscoll way where you just say shit to be shocking. I don't agree with that. I've never been a big fan of just shock value stuff. I may have done that when I was younger, But I think when we tell the truth and it's shocking, it's that truth is usually worth taking a look at, Or if it affects an emotion, causes an emotion within us to be angry or hurt or things, I think instead of saying like we should ban that, or you should have warned me about that, maybe we should look at ourselves. Maybe it's a moment for us to grow and go, why does this make me feel uncomfortable? Or why am I angry about this? Why am I going to attack mode? Or why am I going into depression mode? Or why do I want to hide? Or why am I defensive? Is it the fact that there may be some truth to what's being said that makes me uncomfortable? Because the world is full of contradictions that exist, the dialectic that exists at the same time, that are both true at the same time, that we all have to deal with. But unfortunately, we want to put things in little boxes, tiny boxes, and just we love people who like, I'm non-binary. My sexuality is non-binary, and we celebrate it. But as soon as you come out and say, well, my thinking is non-binary, we get a little bit weird, because we're like, wait a second, you got to have good and bad in here. You got to have this and that. And sometimes it's just not always that. It's not black and white. We're afraid of the gray. We're afraid to live in the tension. Someone just posted shadow work. Yeah, we're afraid of that stuff. And so what I want to do here is encourage us to think differently. And I've said this before, think critically, which we talked a lot about, not last week, but the week before, is what is critical thinking. But to also do that towards ourselves. It's so easy to critique the other. It's so easy to critique the church. It's so easy to critique the liberal. It's so easy to critique the conservative. But we forget sometimes that maybe we're the ones who need to be critiqued. And are we putting in place a society or a culture that we want our kids to be able to grow up in? Like, part of me growing up, I got beat up and messed up and made mistakes and, hurt myself and learned lessons and and did things to know not to do them. And it's funny, like, because now I can look at people doing some of those same things, and I can say, hey, you know, that probably could lead to being hurt. Like, I know this one friend of mine who's, or a person, not friend, but acquaintance of mine, who's really into like psychedelics and drugs, you know, and it's the answer, and find your inner peace, you know. But they never talk about the bad part, you know. And for me, I did a lot of psychedelics growing up, LSD and mushrooms and things like that. I never met God on them, unfortunately. Sorry. Had a lot of weird trips and saw a lot of weird stuff. But in my teenage years, I started to get acid flashbacks, which I thought old hippies was just a rumor that old hippies told. And then I started to get them. And then those flashbacks are kind of like really intense panic attacks with some visuals. To the point where I remember going to see my dad in prison saying, Dad, something's happened to me. I'm going crazy. And I think it's because I did these drugs. And if I have to get a piece of my brain operated on or anything, I just want this to stop. And he sent, you know, here my dad is. And my dad knew a psychiatrist. So he called the psychiatrist and said, will you fly my son down to stay at your house and help him? He thinks he's going crazy. But one of the things I wanted to do is say, listen, you know, it's great that you're finding power and positivity in these drugs, these type of drugs, and you're helping people find their inner spirit and or whatever. But, you know, there's a negative side as well. You know, there's a side that's destructive. There's a side that hurts people. There's a side that can hurt your mental psyche, especially if you've been through trauma that you've not had worked out. And sometimes people are using this to help them get to deal with that trauma. So I'm not saying I'm like, oh, say no to drugs. You know, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we have to remember that life is complicated. There's two truths, and you can't just get, you know, that's what we don't like about religion. We don't like a religion that's like, oh, if you just follow Jesus, everything's going to be happy and safe. You know, that's why most of us are disillusioned with religion. Like, everything's going to be great, you know, as long as you're not gay or don't have an abortion, you're going to go to heaven and it's going to be awesome. And we're all like, okay, we kind of realized that was bullshit. You know what I mean? But it's funny that, like, if something's more politically correct, we're not willing to call bullshit on it. You know what I mean? Like, if something's more like, oh, that's kind of fuzzy and friendly, so I better not call bullshit on that. You know, and for me, I'm going like, no. And it's not saying I'm calling bullshit in a disrespectful way. It's saying I just want more. We should just have more knowledge. We should be willing to talk about things. We should be willing to talk about certain things. You know, people react to things differently. Some people love roller coasters, man. I hate roller coasters. One, I'm like, I get panic attacks as soon as I'm locked into anything because I have claustrophobia. Thank you, Mom. And my mom had claustrophobia as a kid, and I think I just was like, small places bad. Don't like to be locked in anything. And then I'm like, hey, I'm going to twirl you around. I don't like that. But, man, I've got friends who dig that stuff, you know, and to each their own, you know. Like, it's great because I get to, like, I'll hold your stuff when we go to the theme parks. I like theme parks. I just don't like the crazy rides, strangely enough. But I love people watching, and I love paying $100 to watch people and hold your stuff for you and do a little maybe souvenir shopping. Anyway, point being is I think we've got to be open to hearing one another's opinions and different ideas and different thoughts. We also should be able to tell our truth without attacking, you know, each other. And sometimes, I mean, like, I've never been like, well, we'll just have to agree to disagree. But sometimes agreeing to disagree is not the worst thing in the world. Because sometimes that's just saying we both need to grow. You know, we both feel that we've reached a place where this is the truth, but ultimately you never really arrive at it. So maybe we just need to realize that this is where we're both at in our journey and respect that. So it sounds like I'm trying to build a better humanity or a better society. And to be honest with you, that's part of it, because I want to live well. I want to see you live well. I want to see my children grow up in a world where they live well and live good lives. They're going to have hell. They're going to have struggles. There's going to be suffering. That's just the realities of the world that we live in. But I would like to give them all a chance. And I would like to see them grow. And I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of the diseases, a lot of the problems in the world that we're looking at are not going to go away if we ignore them or just say they're bad or cancel them, because I think other people will just come out and do it a different way. I think what happens is if we educate each other and we educate ourselves and we're open to discussions, and we're not afraid. Because when we become afraid of other people, or we become offended by other people, or we allow them to kind of move our emotions all over the place, guess what? They're in control. People all of a sudden are controlling us. So now we're being controlled by society. So when we're saying like, well, no, I'm not saying don't have boundaries. I think boundaries are great, and I think we should all have them. I have them. I have to work on having them. I have to respect other people who have them and work on respecting their boundaries. But I'm talking about a different type of thing here. Is like, certain things that do need to be talked about. We can't hide from politics. We can't hide from these. We should have these tough conversations. Unfortunately, we've all become so focused on like, well, I just say all my shit on social media. But, that's not changing anything. It's not changing a lot. I think the great conversations happen at work, and those things. And so when I said, like, when we're afraid to come to work and we're afraid to go to our friends and say and be who we are, what I want to encourage you to do is say, live who you really are. And sometimes if we're too much for people, maybe that's just not the people who we need to be in our lives at the time. Or that maybe we need to realize that this is how I work with this person, but I also have people here who I can talk to. Community, that's why the community is supposedly such a cool thing, is because there's a lot of people with different personalities and different types that we can work with. And I like when Paul said, I'm all things to all men. He wasn't saying I'm a people pleaser. He was just saying, like, I just know how to communicate and work with others. And I think that's what we're called to do. I think Dr. King showed us that. I think my mom was able to do that. My mom was able to sit down, with conservative evangelicals and preach and sing to them. And then she was also able to go to the gay pride parade and lead everybody in Yes, Jesus Loves Me. And that's who she was. She was able to move in a way that would seem contradictory to most, but to her it was just non-binary world that she lived in. And for her, she had this truth that was love, and that was Jesus, and that Jesus loved you, and she just wanted everybody to know that, whether if you were whatever you were. And to me, that's kind of a cool thing, and that's kind of the idea behind grace. And then I also wrote down a quote by Morrissey, and he wrote one of his songs. It's not even a quote; it's a lyric from his song. He goes, I'm human and I need to be loved just like anybody else does. And I think we all have that feeling of we want to be loved. We want to be cared for. And where do we find that? And I am extremely introverted, but what I'm starting to realize is that I do need it. I do need to be loved, but I don't need to be loved by the masses, But I do need to have a few friends and special people in my life who love me. Steve Peters has become a really great friend, and he's someone I always know I can go to. I never feel like I'm overreacting with when we chat. I feel like I can come to him about something that most people consider silly, and he'll hear me with grace and compassion and know that it's hurtful and important to me. And I love that. That's a great relationship to have. One that came from my mother, and I've got Pete, and me and Pete, how we work together and discuss things together and talk about things, and Pete's always, sometimes has that tough love switch on, and because he's Irish, and he's from Belfast, and grew up in hell. But I get something from my relationship with Pete that I don't get from anybody else either as well. So we have this great growth of truth, and we step on each other's toes, but we grow from it, and there's nothing off limits, It doesn't mean that it's not going to be offensive, or it doesn't mean that it's not going to make you wince a little bit, but we are able to have these tough conversations. And honestly, his work has influenced me in such a way as why I come here and want to encourage people to have tougher conversations, to argue well, to know that when someone disagrees with you, or if someone's angry at you, it's not the end of the world. I once had a therapist say, well, what happens if they're mad at you? I'm like, well, they're mad, and being kind of the introverted, feely, touchy person that I am, I'm like, well, they're mad and it's the end of the world. And they're like, is it really the end of the world? I'm like, no. And they're like, are they mad? I'm like, yeah, they're going to be mad forever. Well, that would probably be really hard to work on. I have a few people I'll be probably mad at forever, but they really had to do some awesomely bad stuff. And you start to realize, well, that's okay. And it's not my opinion, and it's not under my control whether they're mad or they're hurt or they're sensitive or not. That's not under, and it might not even be my fault. So sometimes it's just realizing that you have to let people be people, let people be human, and let people have a human experience. One of my favorite quotes is by Cornel West, and he goes, I cannot be an optimist, but I'm a prisoner of hope. And when we live in a world that is so complicated, everybody's divided over vaccines and masks, what's happening with other countries in this world, what's happening with people who want to come into our country. The world is so divided. Politics, woke culture, conservative culture. I mean, what's happening in Texas? I didn't even realize there was that many pro-life people still around, to be honest with you. But all this stuff is happening, and you just see these extreme, but it's like, where's the conversations that are going to change things? And I think if we don't have the conversations and the right conversations with the right people, and we go, oh, I'm not even going to talk to you, sometimes that gives a chance for your enemy to be like, oh, great, don't talk to me, because we're just going to sit here and work on things, and we're going to grow, and we're going to make it bigger, and then it becomes an issue. Like, I think it's our job is to educate people, but you can't educate people who don't want to listen. So that's the line we have to often walk, is how do we do that? And that's what I have hope for. I have hope that we can learn to talk with people we don't agree with, that people that we even have resentments towards, speak truth with them, and work out our problems and work out our issues. For me, I'm going to use an example, a personal example. Like, I am divorced, you know that. I have 2 kids. And me and my ex are really, really different. And we have different things we want out of life, different passions, and we both raise the kids different. Don't think either one's wrong. It's just, this is how we choose to do things. And so we constantly, and it's sometimes really frustrating for both of us, is have to work on it or compromise or have tough conversations. And sometimes we just argue. And then we realize, okay, why are we arguing? Then sometimes we get to the end of the argument and we're like, why did that start? We have to scroll back through to figure out what we were arguing about. But why do we do it? Because those kids are so important. We have them 50% each. Those kids are worth every conversation we have, every little inconvenience, anything that's going on there. But also there's great times too. We have a lot of great times as well, not just bad times, But, we're passionate because we love these kids more than life itself. And that, in a way, shows us, if we love people, if we love things, if we love your country, if you love humanity, then maybe you need to see your enemy as an ex, and you're raising kids together. You're in this world together. It's both of your worlds, but you both want the best for it. How can we come together and work this out? How is this possible? And when I said I am a pessimist, and so I honestly probably think none of this will work, but I have a bit of hope that we can learn, that we can grow, that we can look at people like Hegel, we can look at people like Tammy Faye, we can look at people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and Mother Teresa. Here's someone who was surrounded with doubt but still gave everything she had even when she didn't believe in God, because it wasn't about that. It was, I don't do this because I believe in God. I do it because I love these people. God might have gotten me here, but I'm here. But now I'm here. You see what I'm saying? It's tough. Right now I'm having to draw a lot of boundaries with folks who have really strong opinions about my family. But it's because I know I can't spend all my time on social media trying to convince people or explain to them what happened. I've written books about it. My mom's written books about it. My dad's written books about it. I'm like, man, there's documentaries about it. There's people who also wrote books about it. I can just show you a bunch of books. I can tell you which books are bad, which books are good. But honestly, I can't sit here. But honestly, does it hurt when you say these things about my mom? Yes. And I start to go into depression. And when I realize I'm in depression is when we have to back off. And I recommend this for a lot of people, is when you're depressed, depression lies to you. 3 years ago, I tried to take my life. I woke up in the hospital. So, I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, I want attention. Like, I thought I was going to be dead, and I didn't die. Somehow and next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, and I guess they pumped my stomach in an ambulance. I don't know. I don't remember. I mean, I know I was in an ambulance, but that's all I remember. And then I was in a psych ward after that for a while. I remember that. But depression says your children will be better off without you. People will be better off without you. There is no hope. And it's a liar. And I know things that trigger my depression because I have so much trauma from being a young child, and so much of your trauma happens when you're young, that I know going back there and fighting that fight is not the best place. You know where I do that fight at? I do it when I go see my analyst once a week. He would like me to go twice a week, to be honest with you, but I can't afford it. But it's when I go see my analyst, that's where I do those fights. That's where I work it out. That's where I find out what's worth fighting for. Because I can get nasty. And it's really hard to be a preacher of grace and love and compassion and then, tell somebody in a tweet or a Facebook message, like, to go to hell and fuck themselves. And I don't like to cuss when I do talks, but that's just where I'm at this point. You just don't want to do that. It's like, oh, that's really graceful. You're like, no, it's not. I know it's not graceful, but you triggered a point in me that I don't know what to do with. You've triggered something in me that I don't know how to deal with. And I think that's why understanding our mental health issues, understanding what we're going through is also really important. I feel like I'm giving you guys a whole lot of crap right now, a whole lot of information right now, and I'll try to just bring it down. Let's just try to wind this down for a minute, and then we'll do maybe a little Q&A and a little afterglow, and then go our particular ways. But man, it's been a tough week. Just personally, like, as this movie gets moving, it's wild what people want to tell me. One of the things that I find extremely strange is like when people want to be like, oh, this used to happen to my dad a lot. I'm going to jump around. Like/don't like. And people used to come up to my dad and be like, you know what, Jim Baker, I've forgiven you. And he'd be like, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I accept. Thank you for that. And then he'd be like, you know what, I really hated you because you were just the worst type of scum there was. And then they go through the whole story. And I did this once with Jerry Falwell. Now, I forgave him, but first told him how horrible he was. And it's something that we often need to do. We want to get that we feel like it's going to give us closure. But it ends up kind of throwing out the whole, like, I've forgiven you thing, because basically you're like, I'm going to beat the hell out of you and then let you know I've forgiven you. And I remember used to watching this, and my dad was always so graceful with it. But I was like, man, they kind of like, said they forgiven you and then kicked you in the nuts. Dad, that's kind of weird. And he's like, well, son, some people have to vent, have to deal with things that way. And I realized as an adult. But I still see people like, oh, man, I love your mom. She's the greatest. But your dad is a piece of shit grifter, and I don't want anything to do with him. I'm like, why? What? I'm their kid. Or it's even worse is when they start talking negatively about my mom. I'm like, that's not only my mom, but that's my late mom. My mom's gone. And I was very close to my mom, and I knew her better than you'll ever know her. And what your opinion was because you watched a couple episodes of Nightline in the 80s and read a few fucking People magazines really doesn't add up to what I've been through. Like, I just don't think I would search out anybody's kids to tell them, I think your family's shit. I think, Now, let me tell you this, is it would be one thing if it was just all the old 1980s conservative evangelicals. But when I started noticing these things, this is why I shut down this whole Facebook message and everything. When I did that, I feel like I'm in therapy right now. Sorry, everybody, but I got to be me. When I just shut it down, but when I wanted to look at some of these people's profiles of who were being the most venomous, they were mostly really woke people. They were like, get vaccinated and wear your mask. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm down with that. Black Lives Matters. I'm like, yep, totally, but then all of a sudden it was like, came to my family and we're shit, and I was like surprised how many like progressive people and woke people lack grace and forgiveness towards a certain group of people. I had a Freudian slip. I said turds, probably because I think people who act that way are acting like turds. So it's not just like the old groups. It's everybody. Now, here's the thing that I started to think about, though, is because I'm watching all this and going like, isn't this the thing that most of us rejected the church for? Is for how mean the church could be. And we always talked about how mean Christians were. I used to have this magnet on my refrigerator, and it was like, I love you, Jesus, but I can't stand your fan club, And it's like a guy talking to Jesus, and Gandhi was like, I love your Jesus, it's your Christians I can't stand, or whatever, and growing up, the Christians are the only army that shoot their wounded, and I was like, Christianity, people leave the church, oh, Christians suck, Christianity sucks, okay, yeah, I get it. But now, like with social media, it seems to be that I don't think it's God or Christianity necessarily. To me, I think it's humanity. That when we get into this group think, and all of a sudden we either think we have God on our side, or we have our screens to protect us, or God to protect us, or whatever this invisible thing is to protect us, we just don't treat each other with respect and kindness and love and compassion and grace. It's like this thing I've been seeing, like a lot of people talking about deconstruction lately, and I feel like I've been doing deconstruction most of my life. But a lot of these deconstructionists that I see online are always like just talking about how horrible the church was and how horrible the youth groups was and how horrible, and I'm going like, that's not deconstruction. Like you're supposed to, and I understand, like you want to be angry about the church. I get it. Trust me, I'm angry. Trust me, I got it from both sides in Christianity growing up as a kid, still do now. It's like, I get it. But I think the problem is much bigger than we thought it was. So I don't think we can just focus and it's all the conservative Christian faults. Because I'm fine to tell you what, I've noticed that you progressive Christians are just as mean, just in a really different way. And you also, instead of sending people to hell, you just cancel them. You send them into nowhere. And so there's no room for discussion or redemption or forgiveness. Now, here's my thing. If you don't follow Christianity, you don't have to worry about those words, forgiveness, redemption, and all that stuff if you don't want to. But if you follow Christianity, the biggest part of Christianity is forgiveness and redemption. Now, sometimes this forgiveness is from afar. Sometimes loving your enemy just means you pray for them because you can't be around them because it's not safe. You don't want to through pearl swine. You don't want to spend your whole time bickering and arguing. You don't want to do that. And there's no reason for you to do that. So that's part of it. Okay? I've said that in talks before. Sometimes people want me to express everything in a talk, and it gets really frustrating because it's hard to cover every base. But I'm going to try to because I think this one's important. But Christianity, for me, is not about casting people out. Even when Paul talks about kicking that person out who was sleeping with their mother-in-law and stuff, in the next book he says, all right, I wanted to see how far you guys have gone. You've actually gone too far. Now bring that person back and restore them. Now, this is a guy who was sleeping with his mother-in-law, okay? But he said, you got a little too zealous. Now bring that person back, love them, and restore them. I have to believe that these are the type of things that made my mom, is reading things like this, that she just realized that there was just, the grace was so amazing. I don't believe in a literal hell. I don't believe there's a literal hell actually in the Bible if you do a word study. So I don't, for me, I don't even know about the afterlife at this point in my theology and philosophy thinking, but I'm growing constantly, so that's a whole nother talk. I'm sure a lot of you just wrote me off, and that's okay. It's probably best for us both. But maybe God isn't the problem with the church. Maybe it's human nature to be hypocritical and judgmental. I mean, social media reminds me so much of church people growing up. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to me too. Also, when I have really big atheists come after me and tell me how horrible my parents were, and stuff like that, because I'm just like, man, if you only knew like how much you have in common with other Christians, it's pretty fantastic. But I think the issue is our human nature, and what happens when we have groupthink and we're not able to think for ourselves. And that's what I always liked about punk rock, is it really encouraged individual thinking. But it also encouraged you to be into a community, and it was this huge community, but it also encouraged you to think about truth and question authority and question truth and to have tough conversations. And sometimes those conversations would lead to fights and arguments. I mean, there was a lot of division in the punk rock community, and it always will be, but especially back in the 70s, early 80s. But it's one of the reasons I like that. So what I want to encourage you folks to do is be yourself, think for yourself, think differently, think critically. When you're offended or defended, offended, think about why. And what does it have to do with me, and what does it touch in me? To have a little bit of hope for the future, because I think hope is what brings the future into the present. So when we have hope, and I think this is why depression is such a pain in the ass, is because it steals you from hope. I think hope causes us to disagree well because we're letting the future enter into the now for a moment. Hope is saying, I'm going to have this conversation because I have hope for the future. I'm going to deal with this so I have hope for the future. And but it's not all that easy. Honestly, talks and sermons can't sum it all up. But I hope you guys can find growth. Have your boundaries when you need boundaries. But for me, boundaries are walls that eventually can move and shift, or you can put a door there for certain people to come through and other people not to. I think that's important. And I can't recommend therapy enough. So honestly, I don't have health insurance right now. I don't make a lot of money, but I see it as like an investment, like most people would be going to school or building into their future. Like, I think it makes me a better father, and a better speaker, and a better author, and a better friend. So yeah, what are you getting from Revolution today? I don't know. I'm tired. Been dadding all week long. I've got a lot more dadding to do right now. Right now, I'd just be nice to each other. And I'll be honest with you, as my community, I could use some niceness, It's funny how many friends of mine, like, how many of my friends, I guess my contemporaries, get really quiet when all this shit happens. That's tough, because back in the day, it was like when my family lost everything, I was like, well, I guess we realized who our friends were and weren't, And I don't necessarily think that's true. I just think some friends don't know how to be friends, don't know how to love, don't know how to connect, don't know how to be there for each other. And I think that's something that we can all learn. And but also, they don't know if you don't ask, I guess. So you can use encouragement. The next few weeks are going to be tough. I'm going to try to do a few questions here. I'm going to screen through. Caleb's not here right now, so we don't have any him looking it up. So I have to literally scroll through my phone to find what you're saying. I will say Chris just said she got a lot out of this week. I guess she's meeting this talk today, and I appreciate it. Today was kind of like a free thinking thing. I had this whole sermon I've been thinking about for literally a week, like trying to figure it out, and I just didn't do it today because I just got a bug. I just got a bug that wanted to say, maybe it's time for us to stop blaming others or blaming the church and start realizing that there's something bigger at work here that we all have to work through together. Here we go. How far do I go? You guys really chatting it up in here. That's very cool. Good morning. Good morning. Some folks said they're glad to see the film. Oh, someone said, by watching the documentary is how I got to know your mom. I think that's a lot of people saw that documentary, the original documentary, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, and everybody saw my mom in a completely different way. It's amazing what film can do, what documentaries can do. That it's a powerful tool, and it's also amazing when you're able to see people through another lens, not the media's lens, or not social media's lens, or not magazines' lens. I mean, folks, when you see people through that, you're getting such a tiny percentage of who they are. Some of you who probably have great enemies, if you really knew them in person, or people you can't stand, public figures that you can't stand, if you knew them, you would realize that they're not horrific people, that they're just people who've been put in horrific situations. And that if we'd been put into the similar situations, we may have made the same decisions, or maybe worse, or maybe better. I mean, I want to believe we would make better decisions. I honestly, the most staff I ever had at one time was probably 7 people, and I was really overwhelmed, and I had a board of directors and all that stuff, and I was really overwhelmed. And like, my dad had thousands of staff members, and honestly, I don't know if I could have handled that. I would have had to have like 18 assistants. It's really been a rough week for me as well. I lost an artist friend of suicide. I am so sorry, Roberta. That is really tough. That's just hell. There's not any squishy answers for that. When you lose people, it's just tough. I'm very sorry for your loss. God, suicide is such a strange thing, and it's not that you just don't want to live, and there's so many reasons behind it. I wish we understood that more. A lot of you are watching. I love you, Jay, says John. Thank you, John. Oh, there's some people having really great conversations. All right, here we go. Boom, here seems like a big question. From Ken, how do you approach those that are disagreeing with you or have other ideas when you want to sit and come together? For me, sometimes it's just making an appointment. Even online, I've had some really good conversations, to be honest with you, especially in like direct messages. There's been some that have led to phone calls where we've had really good conversations. I had one where it led to a phone call and we screamed at each other for like an hour. And then after that, we worked it out. But we really both had a lot of hurt and a lot of anger and needed to get it out, and we did. But the one thing we didn't do is we didn't hang up. We didn't abandon the conversation, even though we were both very intense and both very emotional. But it seemed like we both honestly probably needed the other to hear what we had to say, and needed to hear it in the way they heard it. And we worked it out. Now, are we best buddies to this day? No. But we did work out our problem and our situation. And if we saw each other, we would be great. We could have a cup of coffee easily and probably talk about it in a calm way. But yeah, we just realized we saw things differently, and that our paths were leading us both into completely different directions based on what we had been educated about, by our knowledge and by what we both felt. We felt differently because we both had different information, and both of us felt this way about our information. We shared that information with each other, and at the end we decided that we still were on separate paths, but there was no reason for us to hate each other because we were on those separate paths. It is sad because sometimes those people won't talk to you. But just because one person won't talk to you is what I'm trying is don't set a rule for not engaging with people who disagree with you. That's the thing. It's like 100 people may disagree with you, but the true leader of that group or that situation might be the one who actually says, I'll listen, I'll talk to you. And that might be the person who needs that change, who needs that education, who needs to be set free from being a prisoner of misinformation. Or this might blow your mind. Or guess what? You might be the one who needs to be set free from the misinformation. You might need to be the one who actually needs the change. You might be the one who doesn't, is missing the point. Well, that's not the fun one, but happens a lot. Okay. I do think starting where you, this is from John, I do think starting with where you agree and affirming what you can, and I think that gives the social capital to disagree without being disregardable. Yeah, no, I think finding common ground is vital. And I think that's the thing is I think we usually, I'd say 80% of the time maybe, have more common ground than what we disagree on, you know? I mean, you could be a parent and you could talk about parenting and about how hard it is. Like I'm a single parent when I have my kids, and I had to go get some stuff altered at the alteration because I wanted to wear a special shirt to the premiere, which is just a plaid shirt, but I just wanted it to fit different. Because I'm vain. And I had to bring my kids because I didn't have any other time to go and not have enough time to have it done. And I went and brought my kids, and like the alteration person was not very happy that my kids were kind of crazy, and like I had to explain to them, like, I'm a single parent. I tried to come here without them. I'm sorry they're crazy. They're 6 and 4. And, my point is like finding other parents to be able to talk to about that stuff. Like I have a friend who used to talk to me about putting her kids to bed and how she would just cry and cry and cry sometimes when they wouldn't go to bed. And it actually really helped. It gave me a lot of empathy and has helped me a lot when I put my kids to bed because I'm so exhausted and so tired and I don't want to lose it. And being like, it's okay to feel those feelings. I think a lot of us have those type of common, we share those type of common issues with each other than the things that we disagree with, and I think those type of things are beautiful and can bring us together and help us just be better, just be okay as humans. Someone said, I also often wonder if venting just a means of being toxic. John says, John, I don't agree with that at all. Because I have friends who I go like, hey, I've got to vent. I've got to let go. And it's not me going like, you're such an asshole. It's like when I'm venting, it's not usually to the person I'm venting about. It's like, I am so frustrated. I've had a horrible day. This is going on. And usually when I'm venting, I'm not looking to be corrected. Or when I'm venting, I'm not looking, for the problem to be solved. This is a problem that happens in marriages a lot is, people will vent and then the other partner, meaning really well, will be like, I've got to fix this, let me fix this for you. And you're not wanting it to be fixed. What you're wanting is for it to be heard. You're just wanting to be heard. You're just wanting to be, matter of fact, what would really help, I often say is like, just agree with me for a few minutes. You might not even agree with me. Just, oh yeah, that's awful. Yeah, they're really bad. Just give me that for a few minutes and then we can go and we can analyze it. When I'm venting, usually it's just, I'm so frustrated and so full of pain and anger that I'm not thinking rationally and I just need to throw up. When I used to drink a lot, there were times where I was so drunk that I was like, oh, I could have another drink, but I just gotta throw up. And if I throw up, I'll feel better and I can party longer. And so I don't do that anymore. But that's how I see venting is like, I want to go on with life, but I just need to be vented. Honestly, for me, sometimes venting is just kind of asking to be heard and to be cared for. I just like, hey, I'm hurting. I got a lot of stuff going on. I need a hug. Sometimes that's what I'm really saying is when I'm venting is I just need a hug and I just need someone to say, you're okay. It's okay. And if there's something that's really sending off the red flags, maybe after I have some food, we can have a conversation about that. And you can tell me like, hey, did you ever think about their perspective? Which is really cool because Pete Rollins is my best friend. It really is that way with me. Like I can vent with him and then he'll say, like, all right, now I know you're angry and you need to say all this stuff. Get it out, man. Get it out. But then he'll sit down and like, all right, now let's look at it. What's your part in this and how well, if you deal with it this way, is that really professional? Is that the best way? And you go, no, it's not, and go through those things. So I'm grateful for that. I don't have a lot of friends, but the ones I do are pretty quality. Sounds abusive, beat you up while saying I love you. Yeah, it stinks sometimes. But, there's also things called tough love, which sometimes is okay. You just got to make sure that there's love with the toughness. Sometimes tough love minus the love is not love. But sometimes people just have to tell you the truth and it hurts and it winces. Oh God, I've had that happen a few times and they were right. And honestly, when they're right, it hurts worse. You're like, ah! When they're wrong, you're like, oh. When they're right, oof, that hurts. The truth shall set you free. Yes, indeed. All right, here we go. My friend Beth here. When anyone has ever tried to talk about your family, I stop them gently in their tracks and say, I know them in a personal level, and they're wonderful people. They were always good to me. Then they listen and begin to understand the truth because they sense the love. That's beautiful. Thank you, Beth. That means a lot. And Beth did know our family very personal, like the ins and outs and depths of who we were. Oh, I just did something weird to the phone. Okay. Like she saw behind the curtain. So Beth was a security guard, a bodyguard for my sister, but became like family. I think if you talk to majority of people who were security guards for us, who were around us, they would say there was a family feeling there. Unfortunately, people tend to pass on their own trauma until they react to help it change. I'm sorry that happened to you. Thank you. Yeah, I held my own trauma down as well. I think the reason I tried to take my own life is because I just did not deal with a lot of stuff. I just kept moving forward and thought that's what a man is supposed to do, is to move forward and just be tough and be strong. And it just all caught up with me. I don't think I can just blame the person or a certain thing that was happening at that time in my life. It was history. History decided to come and show up. That's why I'm such a strong believer in therapy, especially in seeing psychoanalysis, going to psychoanalysis. Unfortunately, most insurance doesn't cover psychoanalysis, which is such a shame because it's really a beautiful, powerful tool, and you don't end up on medication for the rest of your life. Here's one from Charles. I like this one. Before you worry about the afterlife, we need to worry about it here and now and about our own relationship with and afterlife of God. There you go. Hope brings future into the present. Love that thought and as it resonates. Oh, thank you. I know I was writing that today and I was like, oh, that's not bad. Toot toot. Love you, Jay. Thank you, Roberta. I love you, Jamie. Thank you, Beth. I got a lot out of this week. Oh, we're back, Chris. Thank you. If you could talk to your mom right now, what would you say or ask? I would just tell Mom I'm proud of her. I love her. And hey, Mom, guess what? There's a movie and a major motion picture being made about your life. It's crazy. You haven't been forgotten. The kids, Minnie and Milo, love you so much. And do you have any advice for them? What can I tell them? What would you like them to know? They have a picture of their mom, my mom. They have a picture of their grandmother in their room. The other day, Minnie was up by the refrigerator, which is right behind this album. That's why I put that there. And she's kissing and saying, "I love you, Grandma." And I was like, "What's going on?" And I forgot I had put in a picture of my mom on the refrigerator that somebody had sent me, and she was just sitting there and she gave it a kiss and said, "I love you, Grandma." And oh my gosh, my heart just broke and melted into a million pieces. I was just like, ugh. And she reminds me so much of my mom. She even has blue eyes. Me and my ex-wife both have brown eyes, and here's Minnie Faye with blue eyes, and she's just really amazing. She sings all the time. She's exceptional. There's another one who has asked the same question. Thank you for always speaking your truth. Open to teaching about how you have grace. Never forgot you and loved. All right. Roberta said, I'm after hearing today's talk, I'm really happy. I feel better today. And that's encouraging. That's why I hope to do. I hope we can feel better. And I hope, take any nonsense that and if you got something positive, take it with you. That's what I try to say. Oh, the hope about quote is Cornel West. And he says, I cannot be an optimist, but I am a prisoner of hope. Brian says, big supporter since 2004. Hope you made it through your depression. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I made it through. It wasn't easy, and I fought with a lot of people I love, and probably wasn't the nicest person in the world, and probably said some nasty things online to people that I need to delete. But yeah, I did make it through. And it was cool. It's funny that the people who do reach out sometimes when they see it. Like I know a couple people who follow my Instagram. They're like, "Hey, it seems like something's off," and it was really neat. Your mom is so loved, and I hope you know you are too. Well, thank you, Jamie, which is actually my real name, Jamie. Love you guys. Thanks so much. Hey, listen, if you get something out of Revolution, you can go to revolutionchurch.com / I think it's donation and help us out. That's how we survive. We lost a piece of equipment this past week. It got destroyed, and I'm really upset about it, and I need to do something about it, but I'm just not feeling like trying to raise money for equipment right now is probably the best thing, since we just raised money to buy the equipment. Anyway, we could use your support. We love you guys. Thank you so much. I will see you next Sunday. I thank you for your patience. Thank you for your support. Have a great week, folks. Be kind to each other. Bye-bye.